The Source, a New York judge expanding a gag order to include Donald Trump's attorneys, now warning them to stop talking about court staff as a, quote, fired up former president is set to take the stand on Monday. Plus, Israel rejecting new U.S. calls for a humanitarian pause in Gaza, then taking responsibility for a deadly strike outside the largest hospital there. And CNN going one-on-one with indicted Congressman George Santos. His response after surviving a second attempt to expel him from Congress. I'm Kaitlan Collins, and this is The Source. Tonight, there is high drama in a New York courtroom just before Donald Trump is set to take the stand on Monday in 2024, and obviously pressed on the lies about his biography.
You acknowledge, though, fabricating large portions of your life. So why did that? I'm just wondering, people want to know why.
Manu, we've gone through this.
Up next, though, Israel is firmly defending a deadly strike on an ambulance outside of the largest hospital in Gaza City. They're also saying no ceasefire until all the hostages are released. We'll speak to a member of Congress calling for a ceasefire. Also, the only person who voted against going to war in Afghanistan and Iraq after 9/11. That's in a moment. Tonight, Israel is defending itself while also claiming responsibility for a deadly strike on an ambulance outside of the largest, a new phase of Israel's war against Hamas in the coming days. The question is, what does that shift look like? We'll talk about that next. Tonight, U.S. officials tell CNN that they are anticipating a new phase. George Santos is facing 23 federal charges. Santos is going to air on Inside Politics this Sunday, 11 a.m. I promise you're going to want to see it. Meanwhile, tonight, President Biden, he was in Lewiston, Maine, comforting the grieving families and the first responders after last week's mass shootings that killed 18 people. He reiterated his call for action on gun violence. We'll tell you what he said on the ground next. Today, President Biden was on the ground in Lewiston, Maine, a community that is still in shock and mourning, where he issued a call for action on gun violence. Simply for doing their jobs. I'll explain right after this. An important story about a small town before we go tonight. The publisher of an Alabama newspaper and one of her reporters have been arrested simply for doing their jobs. Sherry Ann Digman and Don Fletcher of the Atmore News were taken into custody last week, the district attorney filing felony charges following the paper's October 25th article investigating the use of COVID relief funds within the school district, accusing them of publishing evidence from a grand jury investigation in that article. Press advocates are pushing back, and rightfully so. One prominent First Amendment advocate spoke to the New York Times. I'm quoting now, saying if the Nixon administration couldn't imprison journalists who printed the Pentagon Papers, the Alabama DA can't imprison journalists for writing stories about the Atmore, Alabama School Board. I should note that in 2001, the Supreme Court reaffirmed if the information is truthful and newsworthy, news organizations have a constitutionally protected right to publish it. Of course, it may be happening in a small town. It is certainly of great importance. I want to thank you so much for joining us tonight and every night this week. CNN News Night with Abby Phillips starts right now.